My name is Maya, and I am 28 years old. Just last night, my sister Chloe pointed a finger at me and accused me of stealing her diamond necklace, something I had honestly never even looked at. I was completely frozen by her shocking words, but my mother Denise was already screaming. "You have always been so jealous of her," my mother yelled at me. My father Marcus then stepped forward and simply gestured toward the front door. "Get out," he commanded, his voice hard and final. "I will not have a thief living under my roof." Without another word, they physically forced me out of the house. I was sitting in my car feeling a deep burn of humiliation and the chilling night air. I was not crying at first. Instead, I calmly opened the banking application on my phone. I immediately stopped the monthly payment for the mortgage on their large family home. Next, I canceled the payment that went toward Chloe's expensive private university tuition. Finally, I stopped the payment on the lease for the brand new BMW that Chloe drove. They had absolutely no idea that I, their supposed failure of a daughter, was the sole reason their seemingly perfect life had not collapsed entirely. This whole painful event reminded me of the weekly mandatory Sunday dinner, a ritual my father Marcus insisted on to keep the so-called family unity. I always referred to it as my weekly period of intense humiliation. I sat at the shining mahogany table, desperately trying to fade into the background, while my sister Chloe took center stage. Chloe is 31 years old, and she is the absolute golden child of the family, a fact she makes sure everyone is constantly aware of. She was beaming, talking non-stop about a recent visit to meet the family of her fiancé Ryan. Ryan is the perfect match for her in my parents' eyes. He is wealthy, well-connected, and white. Chloe was saying how impressed they were with her flashing the new engagement ring she was wearing for what felt like the 10th time that evening. She quoted Ryan's mother, Cynthia, who had apparently told her that she possessed a natural upper-class aura. She said I fit right in, Chloe stated proudly. My mother Denise was glowing with pride, living for this very moment. "Of course they were, darling," my mother said. "Our family has high standards. We are a respectable family." When she said the word respectable, her eyes flicked straight to me, a pointed glare. "It is such a blessing that at least one of my daughters truly understands the crucial importance of a good image," she continued with a clear jab at me. I chose to simply ignore her comment. I pulled my phone out beneath the edge of the table to check the pre-market future trading numbers. "I am a day trader, which is the professional job my family considers to be a massive failure. They mock me, asking who just plays on the computer all day. They are completely oblivious to the fact that my so-called playing is the only reason the roof remains over their heads." I was so intensely focused on a complex stock chart that I failed to notice how close my elbow was positioned to my water glass. As I slightly shifted my arm, I accidentally knocked the glass over. Ice and water immediately spread across the polished table surface, bringing Chloe's arrogant bragging to an abrupt stop. The dining room suddenly went silent. Chloe stared down at the puddle of water that was spreading quickly toward her expensive designer handbag. Then she slowly lifted her eyes to meet mine. Her face, which had been smiling just seconds before, twisted instantly into pure rage. "Maya," she shrieked, her voice echoing terribly in the quiet room, "you truly cannot manage to do one single thing correctly, can you? You ruin absolutely everything." I quickly grabbed my napkin and began dabbing at the spilled water. "I am so sorry, Chloe," I said. "It was an accident." But Chloe was no longer looking at the water. Her hand flew quickly to her own throat. Her fingers with their perfect manicures quickly patted her collarbone area. Her face went from being red with fury to a stark white with deep panic. "Wait," she whispered, her voice suddenly sharp and tense. "My necklace? Where is my necklace?" Before anyone could manage to reply, she violently shoved her chair back so hard that it nearly fell over. She sprinted out of the dining room, taking the stairs 2 steps at a time. What in the world is she talking about? My father Marcus grumbled, annoyed by this new and chaotic disruption. My mother Denise looked genuinely worried. She was the one wearing the diamond necklace that Cynthia Ryan's mother had given her. "Oh, I hope she has just simply misplaced it," my mother murmured. We then heard a frantic, piercing shriek coming from upstairs, followed by the loud sound of drawers being slammed shut. The heavy, desperate sound of her footsteps running back down the hall was unmistakable. Chloe then suddenly reappeared in the doorway, but this time her expression was not just anger. She was crying, huge, dramatic, theatrical sobs that instantly put both of my parents on high alert and filled them with alarm. "It is gone," she wailed, clutching her hands together tightly. "My diamond necklace, the one from Cynthia. It is completely gone. I left it lying on my dresser for just 5 minutes, and now it has vanished." The room instantly plunged into absolute chaos. My mother rushed immediately to her side. "Oh, baby, are you certain?" she asked. "Perhaps it just fell down behind the dresser. When exactly did you last see it?" "I know exactly where I saw it, Mom," Chloe cried. Chloe's eyes, full of tears, locked onto me with an expression that shifted from panic to a cold, brutal accusation. She raised a single shaking finger and pointed it directly at me across the entire length of the mahogany table. "It was you," she screamed, her voice raw with conviction. "You did this to me." I froze completely still, the dinner napkin still clutched in my hand. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "You have been staring at that necklace all night long," she screamed, the accusation breaking her voice. "You have been so bitterly jealous of me and Ryan since the moment we started dating. You are nothing more than a pathetic failure, and you could not stand to see me finally happy, so you stole it from me." "Chloe, that is absolutely insane," I insisted. "I did not steal your necklace," I said, my voice starting to shake with fear and disbelief. "I did not even go into your room. I went upstairs only to my room to retrieve my phone charger. That is all I did." My mother Denise simply scoffed loudly at my explanation. "A phone charger," she sneered, "now during our family dinner. You are a truly terrible liar, Maya." "It is the truth," I insisted, looking desperately toward my father for support. "Dad, please tell her I would not do this." "Do not lie to me, Maya," Chloe screamed, her face blotchy and red with fury. "You are just a jealous thief." Before I could utter another single word, Chloe suddenly stormed past me and ran toward the area of my bedroom. "Chloe, what are you doing?" I shouted, running quickly after her. "Get out of my room immediately." She completely ignored my demands. She burst through my bedroom door and immediately began ripping the room apart. She yanked open all of my dresser drawers, throwing my clothes onto the floor in a frenzy. "Stop it!" I cried, trying to grab her arm to restrain her. "You cannot just walk in here and do this. Get off of me, you thief!" She spat at me violently, shoving me hard against the wall. My parents, Marcus and Denise, merely stood in the doorway watching the scene unfold. They did not move. They made no attempt to stop her destruction. "See!" Chloe yelled, still frantically rummaging through my belongings. "She is violent. She is obviously guilty." Chloe then ripped the pillow off my bed, and there, lying clearly visible on the mattress, was a small silver hair clip. I froze immediately. Chloe snatched it up quickly, her eyes wide with a wicked triumph. She held it high up in the air and marched back out to the hallway where my parents were still standing. "Here," she screamed, holding the clip right up in my parents' faces. "I told you that she was in my room. I found this silver clip under my pillow earlier today. She must have dropped it when she was stealing the diamond necklace." My mother gasped, covering her mouth in shock. "Oh, Maya, how could you behave this way?" my mother whispered in disbelief. My father's face turned a deep dark red with anger, but I was completely unable to speak. I could only stare numbly at the hair clip she was holding. That was indeed my hair clip. It was the one my best friend had given me years ago. It was the same one I had been desperately searching for all week long. She had not discovered it under her own pillow. She had just moments before pulled it from beneath my own pillow. She must have stolen it from me days ago, planted it inside my room, and was now fabricating a complete lie about where she found it. She was actively framing me for a crime I did not commit, and my parents were believing every single word she said. I am being framed, I screamed, my voice filled with a desperate rising panic. Mom, Dad, can you not see what she is doing? She took that hair clip from my room days ago. She planted the evidence. She is lying about everything. I looked pleadingly at my mother, Denise. Mom, please, you have to believe me. I did not steal anything. My mother's face, which had initially been pale with worry, suddenly hardened into a terrifying mask of pure fury. She stepped forward very quickly, and before I could even manage to react, her hand cracked violently across my face. The sound of the slap was so incredibly hard that my head snapped sideways, leaving my cheek stinging instantly. "How dare you?" she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "You stand right there, caught completely red-handed, and you still lie directly to my face. You have the audacity to accuse your own sister. But I started to say." "Shut up," she screamed. "Just shut up now. I know exactly what is going on here. You are jealous of Chloe. You have always been jealous of her entire life, jealous of her friends, jealous of her future fiancé. You simply could not stand to see her happy." She poked a single finger hard into my chest repeatedly. "You and your pathetic little computer job. We all know that you are broke. We all know that you are nothing but a failure. You likely thought you could pawn that valuable necklace for cash. Did you honestly think we would never discover the truth? You are not only a failure, Maya. You are a liar and a common thief." Her cruel words inflicted far more pain than the physical slap had. I looked past her toward my father, Marcus. He had remained completely silent throughout this entire scene, his arms tightly crossed, just observing. "Dad," I whispered softly, "she is lying to everyone. You know that I would never do something like this." My father simply stared at me for one long cold moment. I saw absolutely no doubt in his eyes, and certainly no compassion, only deep disgust. He slowly shook his head with an air of finality. "I always knew you would amount to nothing at all," he said, his voice flat and absolute, "just a worthless failure playing on a computer all day. And now you have become a common thief as well." The sense of finality in my father's voice was absolute. "I do not need a thief living in this house," Marcus stated, his voice terrifyingly calm. He pointed a thick finger directly at me. "I do not need a daughter who brings this kind of utter disgrace to my home." "Dad, I did not do it," I whispered again, but my words were completely useless against his judgment. He had already made his final decision. He strode quickly over to where my purse was sitting on a dining room chair. Before I could move to retrieve it, he grabbed my purse. "What are you doing?" I yelled. He did not answer me. He seized my arm in an agonizingly tight grip, his fingers digging painfully into my bicep. He started violently pulling me toward the front door. "Dad, stop," I pleaded. "You are hurting me very badly." "Get her out of here, Marcus," my mother Denise said from the hallway. Her arms were crossed and her face was cold and devoid of any emotion. "Let go of me." I struggled frantically, trying to twist out of his painful grasp, but he was far too strong for me. He dragged me forcefully through the entryway, past the framed family photos hanging on the wall. These were pictures of Chloe winning awards and our parents enjoying luxurious vacations, but none of me were visible. He fumbled with the deadbolt on the front door, still tightly holding my arm, and then wrenched the heavy door wide open. The cold, sharp night air hit my face, a shocking change from the overheated dining room. "Get out," he growled at me. He shoved me hard, sending me stumbling out onto the porch steps. Then he held up my purse in the air. "You want this back," he demanded. He did not wait for my answer. He drew his arm back and hurled my bag across the lawn. It landed with a dull thud in the damp grass near the sidewalk. "Get out," he roared at me. "And do not you ever dare come back to this house. You are no longer my daughter. "Dad," I cried out one last time as he turned to step back inside. "Marcus, the neighbors are watching," I heard my mother say urgently. But my father just looked at me with an expression of pure, unadulterated contempt. "She is a disgrace to us," he spat out one final time. Then the heavy oak door slammed shut with a terrible noise. The distinct loud click of the deadbolt sliding into place was the loudest and most final sound I had ever heard. I stood completely alone on the porch, my cheek still throbbing from my mother's brutal slap. My arm was aching badly from the painful strength of my father's tight grip. The intense humiliation I felt was a physical crushing weight pressing down hard on my chest, making it extremely difficult to breathe. I was shaking uncontrollably from both the cold air and the profound shock of what had just happened. I stumbled awkwardly down the porch steps, my legs feeling very unsteady. I walked across the wet grass to retrieve my purse, picking it up, and then trudged slowly to the curb where my old car was parked. It was a 15-year-old sedan, the car I deliberately kept to maintain my image as a failure in their eyes. It was the one car my family would never consider borrowing. I got into the driver's seat and slowly shut the door. The silence inside the small car was completely deafening. I simply sat there staring at the brightly and perfectly lit house, my house, which was now no longer my home. And then the deep tears finally started to come. They were not just tears, but deep wrenching sobs that shook my entire body violently. I was not crying for the necklace I had not stolen, or the physical slap, or the fact that I had been thrown out. I was crying for 28 years of constantly trying to be enough, 28 years of always failing to be good enough for them. I sat in the darkness of my ancient sedan, the sound of my own loud sobs echoing terribly in the enclosed space. A failure, a thief, the awful words my father and mother had used against me. They stung deeply, leaving a massive welt on my soul, just as my mother's slap had left a mark on my cheek. I cried intensely for the absolute humiliation. I cried because after 28 years of relentless effort, I had finally and irrevocably been completely discarded. But as the minutes slowly passed, the hot, painful tears of shame began to turn cold. A totally different memory pushed its way through the intense pain. A memory from exactly 1 year prior to this night. It had not taken place in the dining room, but in my real apartment. The luxurious penthouse they knew nothing about until they had become absolutely desperate for help. They had arrived there unannounced, managing to bypass the doorman by falsely claiming a family emergency. My father, Marcus, a man I had always only seen as a proud, stern patriarch, was now on his knees kneeling on my polished concrete floor. I was laid off from my job. He had stammered, his face pale and gray. It was 6 months ago now, and I have been using my severance pay, but all of it is now completely gone. The bank is foreclosing on our house, Maya. My mother, Denise, was kneeling right next to him. Her hands were clasped so tightly together that her knuckles were entirely white. "They are taking the house," she whispered, her eyes red from her own crying. "Our family home. I remember just staring at them both in shock. You have to save us," my father pleaded desperately. "We know that you play on the computer well. We know that you have some money hidden away." I saw a bank statement that accidentally arrived at the house. My mother then suddenly grabbed my hand, her grip feeling like a steel vise. "But you absolutely cannot tell Chloe about this," she demanded. "Do you understand me, Maya? She is currently at a critical and delicate stage with Ryan. If his incredibly wealthy family discovers that we are financially compromised, it will completely destroy her entire future." They had not simply asked me to save them. They had asked me to save them while keeping it a total secret. They requested that I continue funding Chloe's perfect life, to keep paying for her expensive Parsons tuition, and to maintain their respectable family image. All of this while I had to continue playing the role of the broke, worthless daughter, and I did exactly as they asked. Back in the cold, damp car, my tears stopped suddenly and completely. The initial shock vanished, replaced by an intense, icy and sharp calm. They did not simply throw me out of their house, they had thrown out their only lifeline. You want me to just disappear? I whispered to the empty dark street. The image of my mother's furious slapping face flashed vividly in my mind. I wiped my cheeks, smearing the tears away quickly. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone again. "Fine," I said. I sat quietly in the driver's seat, the engine still off. The only sound was the faint, regular tick of the cooling engine. My breath had fogged up the entire windshield, obscuring the view of the house that was no longer my home. But the fog in my mind was completely gone. The deep humiliation, the raw pain, all of it was still present, but something entirely different had taken its place. A cold, hard clarity of purpose. They did not simply throw me out of the house. They had thrown out their provider. They had actively begged me to save them, to keep their desperate secrets, to fund their entire perfect lives, all while continuing to treat me like dirt beneath their shoes. They had finally made their choice. Now it was time for me to make mine. My hand was perfectly steady as I reached for my phone again. I unlocked the screen. My thumb tapped the icon for my private banking application. This was not the simple consumer app my parents used, but the one that was securely linked to my trading accounts. The app they had absolutely no idea even existed. My face quickly scanned, and the app opened immediately. My massive balance was clearly displayed, a 7-figure number, but I deliberately ignored it. I navigated straight to the Scheduled Payments tab. There was the list, their entire lives funded entirely by me. My finger hovered for only a single second, then pressed down very firmly. First on the list was the mortgage payment for Marcus and Denise Miller, a monthly recurring charge of $4,800. I tapped the option to cancel recurring payment. A prompt appeared on the screen asking, "Are you sure?" I pressed the confirm button. Second was the tuition fee for Parsons School of Design, a semesterly charge of $28,500. I tapped cancel recurring payment. "Are you sure?" the prompt asked again. "Confirm. Chloe would be receiving a very interesting email tomorrow morning." Third on the list was the lease payment for the BMW 5 Series, Chloe's car. $950 a month. Cancel recurring payment. Confirm. Finally, I paused only slightly at the last item listed. The family health insurance plan for Marcus and Denise Miller. This was the biggest one of all. This was the one that provided coverage for all of them, including my father's necessary heart medication. My finger did not even tremble for a moment. Cancel recurring payment. Confirm. A final screen displayed the updates I had just made. All 4 critical payments were now officially listed as canceled. I closed the application, locked the phone, and tossed it onto the empty passenger seat beside me. The silence in the car felt completely different now. It was no longer the silence of utter despair. It was the silence of absolute control. I turned the key in the ignition. The old engine rumbled loudly to life. I put the car into gear, pulled away from the curb, and did not once look back toward the house. I did not drive to some cheap motel. I did not go to crash on a friend's couch. I simply kept driving, my hands gripping the steering wheel of my old sedan very tightly. I drove for a full 20 minutes, leaving their quiet, judgmental suburb far behind me. I headed directly toward the glowing, dazzling lights of the city center. The raw anger and deep humiliation were still burning intensely in my chest, but beneath it, the cold, hard clarity of my decision was firmly settling in. They truly thought I was a failure. They honestly thought I was completely worthless. They had absolutely no idea who I truly was. I turned the sedan into the private underground entrance of the Luminina high-rise. This was not just any ordinary building. This was the luxurious high-rise that Chloe and my mother constantly read about in society magazines. The very building they only dreamed of visiting for a day trip. My key fob beeped loudly, and the heavy security gate rolled open, leading me down into the private residential garage. I parked my 15-year-old failure car right in the middle between a shining black Lamborghini and a dark green Bentley. The sight looked utterly ridiculous. I allowed myself a small bitter smile of satisfaction. I did not enter through the main lobby area. My fob called the private elevator directly to my floor. It opened silently and I stepped inside the car. I pressed the button that was labeled for the penthouse. The doors opened again, not into a hallway, but directly into my home. It was an incredibly vast space with floor-to-ceiling windows wrapping around the entire apartment. These windows showcased a truly breathtaking panoramic view of the entire city lights. The floors were polished dark marble. The furniture was minimalist and entirely modern. It was silent. It was clean. It was safe. This was my real home, the one I had paid for entirely in cash. I walked past the massive state of the art kitchen and continued into my private office. 6 large monitors were securely mounted on the wall, glowing brightly in the darkness. They were alive with the green and red fluctuating lines of the global stock market. This was my pathetic computer job. This was my 10-hour-a-day, 7-figure-a-year obsession. This was the financial empire I had secretly built for myself. All while they were busy calling me completely worthless, I switched on the high-end espresso machine on my counter. The rich, inviting smell of fresh brewing coffee began to fill the air, cutting through the stale memory of my mother's perfume and Chloe's destructive lies. I looked at the clock on the wall. The London market would be opening for trading soon. I took a slow sip of the strong hot coffee, the fire in my chest finally settling into a cold, hard, absolute resolve. It was time for me to get to work. As I sat down in my plush leather chair, the phone that only they knew about, my secret private line, began to ring loudly. The sun was now streaming brightly into my office, hitting the glass and the steel surfaces of the towering high-rise buildings outside. The London market had been quite volatile since its opening, but I had already managed to clear $40,000 in pure profit before 9 o'clock that morning. This intense focus and success was my established routine. This was my true real life. The deep humiliation from that terrible Sunday night, the accidental spilled water, the cruel slap, and being forcibly thrown onto the damp lawn, all felt very distant now. It felt like something I had watched unfold in a movie about a totally different person. On the polished marble island in my kitchen, right next to my high-end espresso machine, my other phone started to vibrate with intense urgency. It was the cheap prepaid phone I purposely maintained just for them. It was the burner phone that perfectly matched the 15-year-old car and the failure persona they insisted I was. The screen suddenly lit up with her name, Chloe. A year ago, my heart would have leaped up into my throat with a terrified quickness. I would have fumbled frantically to answer the call, desperate to please her and terrified of what she might demand. Now I simply watched the phone buzz relentlessly on the counter. It rang and rang, the angry, rattling sound echoing in the peaceful silence of my penthouse. I let the phone call go unanswered. I picked up my strong coffee, took a slow, deliberate sip, and looked out over the vast city below. A few seconds later, the phone buzzed again. A notification for a new voicemail appeared. My curiosity was piqued. I tapped the notification and intentionally put the phone on speaker. I wanted to hear her panic reverberate loudly in my living space. Chloe's voice, usually so smooth and condescending, was now a high-pitched, frantic shriek filled with anxiety. "Maya, where in the world are you?" she screamed. "Pick up the phone, you stupid, you just pick it up right now." The short message abruptly ended. A second later, a loud beep signaled the start of another voicemail. "Meyer, I am absolutely not kidding around," she continued, her voice rising. "I just received a nasty email from Parsons. My tuition payment has been officially declined. It was declined. What exactly did you do?" she demanded. "What did you say to Mom and Dad? They are not answering their phones either. What is truly going on right now?" I took another calm sip of my coffee. The charts on my main monitor were all trending favorably green. It was promising to be a very profitable day. Beep, a third desperate voicemail started. "You are intentionally trying to ruin my wedding, are you not?" she raged. "You complete psycho. You are just jealous of me and Ryan. You are trying to sabotage my entire life. You pick up this phone right now, or I swear to God I will." I will. The message cut off suddenly as she apparently ran out of potential threats to use against me. The silence of my penthouse quickly returned, broken only by the quiet, steady hum of my powerful trading computers. I stared at the notification on the old phone screen. 3 new angry voicemails were waiting. I picked up the phone slowly. My thumb hovered momentarily over the call back button for just a second before moving decisively to the right. I selected all 3 of her messages. I calmly dragged them to the trash icon. A prompt appeared asking delete 3 messages. I pressed the confirm button without hesitation. I immediately turned back to my trading monitors. The market was waiting for my attention. I was deep in intense concentration analyzing a highly complex options trade on the Japanese market when the old burner phone began violently rattling against the cold marble countertop once more. I glanced quickly at the screen. This time the caller ID displayed Mom. I watched the phone vibrate, the name flashing with desperate urgency. I thought about her face just 2 nights ago, contorted with sheer rage as she falsely called me a thief. I thought about the sharp sting of her physical slap across my face. The intense ringing finally stopped. A moment later, the voicemail notification appeared on the screen. I turned up the volume on the speaker, ready to hear this new chapter of their escalating panic. Denise's voice crackled to life, but this time it was not a loud scream like Chloe's. It was a high-pitched, furious whisper. It was the exact kind of voice she used when she was frantically trying to contain her rage in public. Meyer, I do not know what sick, twisted game you believe you are playing, but you need to immediately stop this right now. There was a noticeable pause, and I could hear the faint sound of beeping in the background, as if she were standing in a store. Your father's credit card was just declined at the golf club this afternoon, she announced. It happened right in front of all of his friends. He was forced to have Bill Johnson pay for his lunch. Do you fully understand the deep humiliation this has caused? Her voice grew tighter and more desperate. And my credit card, my American Express, it was declined at Whole Foods. I had a full cart of groceries, Maya. A full cart? I was forced to leave all of it right there at the checkout. All of it. The cashier was staring directly at me. Everyone in line was staring at me. I have never in my entire life been so utterly embarrassed. She was nearly hissing now with barely contained anger. What exactly is going on right now? What did you do? You call me back this instant. You are intensely embarrassing this entire family. The angry voicemail finally ended. I sat there for a brief moment processing her frantic words. Not a single word about "Are you okay?" Not "Did we make a mistake?" Not even "Why did you do this?" Only the intense accusation "You are embarrassing this family." That truly was the only thing that ever mattered to them. Image humiliation and what other people thought. I picked up the burner phone again. I opened the call log. I saw Chloe's multiple missed calls. I saw my mother's multiple missed calls. I calmly went into my contacts list. I located Chloe's number. I pressed the button to block contact. A pop-up asked, "Are you sure?" I pressed the confirm button. I located my mother's number. I pressed the button to block contact. Confirm. I deliberately turned the phone over so the screen was face down. This way, I would not even have to see it light up or vibrate again. The profound silence in my penthouse now felt entirely clean. The next morning, I was completely in my element. The Asian markets had just opened for trading, and I was carefully tracking a complex fluctuation in a specific tech stock. My penthouse office was silent, filled only with the steady glow of my 6 trading monitors. I felt totally focused. I felt completely in control. The vivid memory of Sunday night of my father's hands violently shoving me out the door felt like a scene from a lifetime ago. I had successfully blocked their numbers. I had successfully cut the cord completely. A small new notification popped up on my 4th monitor, the one I primarily use for personal communication. It was an email. The sender's name was Chloe. My finger hovered briefly over the delete button. I had blocked her phone number, but I had not considered blocking her email address. A cold, sharp curiosity got the absolute better of me. I clicked the message open. The subject line was just a frantic string of capital letters and multiple exclamation points. The body of the email was pure, unfiltered, intense rage. You think you are so incredibly smart, do not you? You actually think you can hide from me. I had to admit I admired her speed. It had taken her less than 48 hours to fully realize that both her tuition and her car payment were linked to the sister she relentlessly called a failure. "The bank just called me," she typed frantically. "The bank. They informed me that my BMW 5 Series is officially scheduled for repossession. They claimed the automatic payment completely failed." "What in the world did you do, you worthless piece of trash? You are intentionally trying to ruin my life. First my school, now my luxurious car. Dad is still in the hospital because of your actions. And this is what you are doing. You are evil, Maya, evil." I read the desperate email twice over, the all-capital letters, the sheer desperation in her words. She was not worried at all that our father was supposedly in the hospital. She was only worried about losing her expensive car. She was terrified about the perfect image she presented to Ryan and his wealthy family. She was absolutely terrified of suddenly appearing poor. I looked at the angry email. I looked at my trading screen, which clearly showed I had just made more money in one morning than her precious BMW was even worth in total. I did not feel any anger. I did not feel any guilt. I felt nothing at all toward her. I calmly clicked the forward button. I typed in a new specific address, TRSH. I hit the send button, then I clicked on her email address. A menu appeared on the screen. I moved the cursor down and clicked the block sender option. It was all truly pathetic. For 28 years I had lived in intense fear of Chloe's violent anger. Her yelling, her constant insults, her way of making me feel incredibly small. Now her raging fury, even typed out in all capital letters, felt exactly like a spoiled child's pathetic tantrum. It could not physically reach me here in my sanctuary. It could not possibly touch my success and wealth. She was utterly furious that I had taken away her favorite toy, a toy I had been secretly paying for all along. A toy she drove while I drove my 15-year-old sedan, the car I let them see, so they could continue to feel superior to me. The bitter irony of the situation was suffocating me. She, the golden child, was absolutely nothing without the failure she so openly despised. I took a deep sip of my coffee, ready to get back to my work. I was completely finished with them and their toxic drama. I had successfully cut off every single line of communication, and then the building intercom suddenly buzzed. The sharp, intrusive sound made me jump involuntarily. I looked over at the security panel on the wall. The screen lit up, showing the lobby area downstairs. My doorman Frank was looking up at the camera, and he looked visibly stressed. I pressed the button on the panel. "Yes, Frank," I said. "Ms. Miller, I am really very sorry about this," he apologized. "There are 2 women down here, a Mrs. Denise Miller and a Ms. Chloe Miller. Well, ma'am, they are making quite a significant scene right now." The intercom's sharp buzz cut directly through the peaceful silence of the penthouse. It was a jarring and extremely unwelcome sound in my sanctuary. I glanced at the security panel on the wall again. The screen was lit up, showing the face of Frank, the building's head doorman. He looked flustered and anxious. I pressed the button, and his voice came through the speaker. "Ms. Miller, I am so very sorry to bother you with this," Frank said. Frank always sounded apologetic, but this time I could clearly hear genuine stress in his voice. "There are 2 women currently down here in the lobby, a Mrs. Denise Miller and a Ms. Chloe Miller." He spoke their names like a bewildered question, as if he could not believe these people were associated with the quiet professional woman in the penthouse. "They are well, ma'am, they are making quite a scene." I could almost clearly picture the chaos, my mother Denise pacing frantically on the marble floor, her voice sharp and intensely demanding. My sister Chloe was probably on the verge of hysterical tears, or more likely threatening to call a high-priced lawyer she could not actually afford. They were clearly out of their element, and they were reacting with predictable absolute chaos. They are insisting they are your family and that you are actively expecting them. Frank continued, his voice tight with concern. They are becoming extremely loud now. Other residents are beginning to notice the commotion. Of course, they were causing a spectacle. Humiliation was their family's currency, and they were experts at spending it, whether it was mine or their own. I let out a long, slow, audible sigh. I had blocked their phones entirely. I had blocked their emails completely. I should have known they would instantly escalate to this physical confrontation. They were behaving like spoiled children, loudly banging on a locked door, demanding to be let back inside, so they could continue their destructive behavior. I looked at my trading monitors again. The market was actively moving. I had important work that needed my attention. This was a major distraction I absolutely could not afford, but one I clearly had to deal with immediately. "It is fine, Frank," I said, my voice calm and even tone. I was expecting them, just not exactly today. A small white lie to immediately calm the stressed doorman. "Send them right up to my floor," I commanded. "I will handle this entire situation." "Are you truly sure, Ms. Miller?" Frank asked hesitantly. "I can easily have security escort them out of the building." "No," I said, my voice filled with a cold, unshakable resolve. "It is time I finally handled this once and for all. Send them up." "Yes, ma'am," he replied. Right away. The connection clicked off immediately. The screen went dark. I stood up slowly from my desk. I did not bother to check my appearance. I did not smooth my hair down or adjust my clothes. I walked out of my office across the silent, sprawling living room and stood directly in front of the private elevator doors that opened straight into my home. I folded my arms tightly across my chest. I stared intently at the brushed steel doors. I listened for the faint whirring sound of the elevator car as it began its upward ascent toward my penthouse. The failure, the thief, the disgrace they had banished was waiting for them. The elevator chimed a soft, polite sound announcing their arrival. I stood by the entrance of my penthouse, my arms still crossed, and patiently waited. The brushed steel doors slid open silently. My mother, Denise, and my sister, Chloe, stood inside the elevator car. For a full 3 seconds they remained motionless. They simply stared at their surroundings. Their faces were fixed in a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. They were dressed for battle, ready to storm a cheap walk-up apartment, ready to loudly scream at their failure of a relative. They were completely unprepared for this immense luxury. Their eyes darted wildly in every direction, desperately trying to take in the sheer scale of the space. They looked past me through the grand foyer area. They saw the polished marble floors. They saw the immense 20-foot ceilings. They saw the massive two-story wall of glass that offered a breathtaking view overlooking the entire city skyline. They looked exactly as if they had been instantly teleported to a foreign, distant planet. Chloe was the first one to find her voice again. Her mouth opened and closed, emitting a small, gasping sound. She looked at the luxurious apartment, then back at me, her sister. I was just standing there, calmly dressed in expensive high and athleisure clothing. I was definitely not the broken, pathetic victim she had violently thrown out onto the lawn only 2 nights ago. "You?" she stammered, taking a shaky, hesitant step out of the elevator car. "You actually live here?" she asked in disbelief. I did not offer a verbal answer. I simply raised one eyebrow slightly. I let the deafening silence and the spectacular view speak eloquently for me. Her deep confusion lasted only a fleeting moment before it instantly contorted into her default strong emotion, pure unfiltered rage. The initial shock was immediately replaced by a fierce accusation. "Where did you get all of this?" She shrieked, her voice high and piercing, echoing horribly in the huge open space. "Where did you get all this immense money?" she demanded. She took another aggressive step forward, her eyes narrowing dangerously. "Oh my God, the necklace," she whispered loudly. "You did steal it after all. You stole it and you actually pawned it for cash. You thief. You bought all of this luxurious place with my necklace money." My mother Denise was still pale, clutching her expensive handbag tightly to her chest, as if she feared I might suddenly try to steal it. She looked past me into my massive state of the odd kitchen where the Sub-Zero refrigerator gleamed brightly. She was not just shocked, she looked completely betrayed. Maya, all this time, she whispered, her voice shaking with a different kind of anger. All this time you have been lying to us. Lying. I finally spoke, my voice flat and chillingly cold. I have simply been living my life. You are the ones who deliberately wrote the entire script about me being a failure. You allowed us to constantly worry about your welfare, Denise cried, finding her footing again. You let us honestly think you were completely broke. You allowed your father and me to constantly stress about how you were going to financially survive, all while you were secretly living here in this palace. What kind of sick, twisted game are you truly playing? Chloe was still entirely focused on her primary concern. My car, Maya, she demanded. My tuition. You stopped all of the payments. You have all this money, and you just suddenly cut me off. You called me a thief, I said simply and calmly. You told me that I was extremely jealous. You stood right there and watched while Dad violently threw me out onto the lawn. We were only trying to help you, Chloe screamed back at me. We were trying to teach you a valuable lesson, and you have been secretly living this hidden life. You have been actively stealing from us all along. You are paying for all of this bye-bye. She looked wildly around the penthouse, desperately trying to invent an explanation that fit her selfish narrative. You are dealing illegal drugs, or you have some wealthy man keeping you on the side. That is it not? You certainly did not earn all of this on your own. I almost laughed at the sheer stupidity of the accusation. It was so utterly pathetic and unbelievable. They could not possibly comprehend that I, the supposed failure, could have achieved all of this completely on my own merit. Their small, narrow minds needed to invent a horrible crime or a powerful man to explain my success. I slowly unfolded my arms and leaned casually against the doorframe. I looked directly at my sister, her face red and completely distorted with rage. Then I looked directly at my mother, who was staring at me as if I were some kind of monster. I earned it myself, I said, my voice cold and incredibly clear, cutting right through their hysterical noise. I work hard, I trade successfully, I make a lot of money. I paused intentionally, then delivered the final cutting blow. Unlike some people in this room, I finished, my words cold and razor sharp hung in the air between us. Chloe's face immediately turned an ugly shade of red. She was clearly about to start screaming again. I could see the rage building violently inside her. She was about to lunge forward to accuse me of something else, of absolutely anything else, just to make her false reality make some kind of sense again. But she never got the chance to do it. Your car, my mother Denise finally spoke, her voice low and shaking, not with shock this time, but with a pure white hot rage I had only witnessed a few times in my life. She shoved roughly past Chloe, her eyes locked directly on mine. The fake worry from the hospital story was completely gone. The performance was officially over. You are worried about losing your car. She hissed angrily at Chloe before turning her full, intense fury back to me. The bank called Maya. She growled, her voice a low, terrifying sound. Not about tuition, not about some BMW car. The bank that holds the large mortgage on our family house. The mortgage payment was officially rejected. The foreclosure notice is currently in the mail on its way to us. You did this to us. She lunged violently at me, her hands raised high as if to slap me again, just as she had done 2 nights earlier. I did not flinch in the slightest. I did not even move an inch. I just stood there calmly in the entryway of my penthouse in my own safe space and stared directly at her. I watched this woman who had called me a thief and a failure completely unravel because her free ride was finally over. She stopped just short of making contact, her hand trembling visibly in the air. The sudden realization that I was not cowering, that I was not crying, seemed to confuse her completely. Why exactly should I pay the mortgage on a house I was violently thrown out of? I asked. My voice was quiet, calm, and entirely reasonable. The sound of it echoed slightly in the large marble foyer. You owe us this money." Denise stammered, her rage completely faltering. We raised you properly. We fed you and gave you a home you deliberately kicked me out of." I replied, my voice just as quiet and steady. "You stood right there inside that home and silently watched your own husband violently throw me onto the lawn. You called me a constant disgrace to the family. You called me a thief. He said I was officially no longer his daughter. You cannot disown someone and then simultaneously expect them to still pay all your bills for you." I looked at her, this woman I had desperately tried my entire life to please. I was no longer her daughter. I was no longer a worthless failure. I was simply done with them. "You should try to remember this, Mrs. Miller," I said clearly and distinctly. I was explicitly told to get out and never come back to this house. So I did exactly that, and I took all of my finances with me. The formal name hit her much harder than a physical blow ever could. The intense rage on her face instantly evaporated, replaced by a look of pale, sputtering, absolute shock and disbelief. You called me," she whispered, her hand dropping uselessly to her side. "You called me Mrs. Miller." Denise's face crumpled completely. My cold, formal use of Mrs. Miller was a solid wall she could not possibly break through with her anger. The rage that had been in her eyes dissolved, immediately replaced by a raw, desperate panic. This was certainly not the daughter she could control or manipulate anymore. This was a wealthy, cold stranger who held their entire immediate future in the palm of her hand. The tears that instantly followed were completely genuine, but they were not tears of remorse for her actions. They were tears of pure, terrifying fear for her lifestyle. "Maya, please," she sobbed, taking a clumsy, staggering step forward, her hand reaching out tentatively for me. "Maya, baby, you truly cannot do this terrible thing to us. You cannot. That is our family home. It is your father's home and the home you grew up in. I did not move an inch from my spot, the home you violently threw me out of," I said, my voice completely flat. "We were just angry at the time," she cried, the tears now streaming down her cheeks unchecked. "We made a huge mistake that night. Your father, Marcus, he is not well at all. His heart, you know about his bad heart condition. Maya, this intense stress will actually kill him. It is about the family," she pleaded. "You cannot just throw away your entire family like this. Family." I repeated the word, tasting like bitter ash in my mouth. "Family does not actively frame their own sister for a felony. Family does not call their daughter a common thief and then silently stand by while she is physically thrown out onto the lawn. You are just doing this intentionally to hurt me." Chloe finally found her voice again. She had been frozen completely still by the elevator, paralyzed by the sight of my luxurious apartment, by the terrifying realization that her world was rapidly collapsing. I turned my cold, hard gaze toward her. "Hurt you, Chloe?" I asked. "I am simply tidying up my personal finances. You should actually try doing that sometime yourself." I let a small, cold smile touch my lips briefly. "And speaking of your finances, that Parsons tuition is extremely expensive, is it not? It must be terribly difficult scrambling to find a way to pay for it all now." I let the sharp words hang heavy in the air, watching her face go completely white with terror. "You should have just successfully pawned the lost necklace for the money," I suggested. Chloe gasped loudly, her hand flying quickly to her mouth. She had absolutely no answer for me. She knew I knew the truth, or at least she knew I was not fooled by her pathetic, elaborate story. She looked wildly toward her mother, desperate for help or intervention. But Denise was not even looking at her daughter. My mother was frozen, staring intently at her own phone, which had just started ringing urgently. It was not her usual cheerful ringtone. It was a sharp, formal buzzing sound she reserved specifically for unknown numbers. Denise fumbled frantically in her purse, her hands shaking uncontrollably. She pulled out the phone and stared at the illuminated screen. Her face, which was already pale, lost its last remaining drop of color. Mom, Chloe whispered, her own drama momentarily forgotten. Who is calling? Is it the bank again? Denise slowly shook her head, her eyes wide with a new and different kind of fear. I do not know who this is, she whispered fearfully. It is Mercy Hospital. Denise stood completely frozen, staring at the ringing phone in her hand. The caller ID clearly displayed Mercy Hospital. Mom, Chloe whispered again, her own dramatic crisis forgotten for the moment. Who is calling? Is it the bank again? My mother slowly shook her head, her hand trembling violently as she fumbled to answer the call. She pressed the phone to her ear. Hello? She managed to say, her voice barely audible. There was a noticeable pause in the conversation. I watched her face, the last bit of color instantly draining from it. Her eyes went wide, not with anger, but with a new, hollow, terrifying fear. What? She whispered into the phone. What did you just say to me? Mercy Hospital, is he? Oh my God! Her knees suddenly buckled completely. She did not fully faint, but she crumpled quickly, collapsing onto the expensive marble floor of my entryway. The designer handbag she always clutched so tightly skittered away across the floor, spilling all of its contents. Marcus, she shrieked, a raw, guttural sound I had never heard from her before. Oh my God, Marcus, he is at the hospital right now. Chloe rushed immediately to her mother's side. Mom, what is wrong with Dad? Denise looked up at her daughter, her face now a terrifying mask of disbelief and pure horror. Your father, he had a massive heart attack, she stammered. He collapsed right there at the bank. They said he collapsed immediately after they informed him about the foreclosure notice. Oh my God, he is in the ICU. Chloe stumbled backward as if she had been physically struck. A heart attack, she gasped. It is all completely over. Denise sobbed uncontrollably, hitting the floor hard with her fist. The house, the money, Marcus, she wailed. Chloe's head snapped around toward me instantly. The shock on her face vanished, immediately replaced by a dark, murderous rage I had never seen before. Her eyes were no longer just angry now. They were completely filled with pure, undiluted hatred. You, she screamed, lunging violently at me, her hands clawed like an animal. This is entirely your fault. I stepped back instinctively, but she was incredibly fast. She grabbed the front of my shirt, roughly shoving me hard against the wall. You did this to him. She screamed, her face inches from mine, with spittle flying from her mouth. You and your sick, twisted games with our finances. You cut off all the money, you caused him all this terrible stress. If he dies, Meyer, I swear to God, if he dies, I will personally kill you. She was violently shaking me, shoving me repeatedly against the wall surface. I will kill you, Chloe, Denise screamed, scrambling back to her feet. Stop it immediately. We have to go right now. We have to go to the hospital right now. Chloe held my gaze for one more intense second, her eyes promising murder and revenge. Then she finally released me, shoving me one last time, and ran straight for the elevator, dragging her sobbing mother along with her. The heavy steel doors slid quickly shut, leaving me standing completely alone in the ringing silence of my penthouse. I slowly slid down the wall until I was sitting on the cold, hard marble floor. My heart was pounding violently in my chest. My shirt was rumpled badly where Chloe had grabbed me, and my mind was intensely reeling. A heart attack? He had a very real heart attack. Chloe's words echoed loudly in the empty room. If he dies, I will kill you. My stomach instantly turned to ice. Was this truly my fault? I had only taken back what was rightfully mine. I had only stopped them from relentlessly bleeding me dry financially. But a heart attack? Was this the terrible outcome I had truly wanted? Did I just unintentionally kill my own father? The heavy steel elevator doors had slid quickly shut, leaving me completely alone in the echoing silence of my luxurious penthouse. I stood completely motionless for a full minute, the uncomfortable imprint of K.H. Lowe's grabbing fingers still smarting on my expensive shirt. Her frantic scream, "If he dies, I will kill you," bounced loudly off the cold marble floors of the entryway. I thought to myself. The thought was like a sudden cold spike of ice piercing my stomach. Did my actions actually cause my father's severe heart attack? I walked mechanically into my private office, the 6 monitors glowing steadily, waiting patiently for my commands. The Asian markets were wide open, the stock charts were intensely fluctuating. This large room was my safe sanctuary, my fortress built on logic and cold hard numbers, the only place where I felt I was in complete, absolute control. I sat down slowly in my leather chair. I put my trembling hand on the mouse to begin working. I found that I could not click the button. My hand was shaking uncontrollably. I stared intently at the green and red lines on the monitors, but they were just a meaningless, confusing blur. All I could clearly see was my father's face in my mind. It was not the angry face of the powerful man who had thrown me violently out of the house, but the face of the broken man who had a year ago knelt desperately on this very floor begging me for financial help to save his family home. The intense stress his heart condition I remembered. He always had a history of having a bad heart. Denise knew about his condition. Chloe knew about his condition. And despite knowing this, I had still pulled the plug on his entire financial life. I stood up quickly, unable to sit still any longer. I began to intensely pace the entire length of the living room back and forth. My bare feet were silent on the cold marble floor. I paced from the massive wall of glass overlooking the city lights to the sleek stainless steel kitchen area. "You are a failure," my mother's harsh voice hissed loudly in my memory. "A thief," my father's stern voice echoed loudly in my memory. "I will kill you," my sister's angry voice screamed in my memory. I sank slowly onto the luxurious sofa, burying my face tightly in my hands. Was this truly what I wanted all along? I wondered. Revenge. Was this feeling of hollow emptiness victory? It certainly did not feel like any kind of victory at all. It felt deeply sick and entirely hollow. Then a different voice, a totally different memory, surfaced suddenly. "If you fall, you get right back up, girl. Do not you dare ever give up on yourself." I looked up suddenly, as if the man were physically standing right there in the room with me. The memory was sharp and crystal clear. I was only 8 years old at the time. I was on the cracked sidewalk of our old neighborhood, long before the respectable house existed. My knee was badly skinned and bleeding onto the rough pavement. My brand new bicycle, the blue one, was lying twisted and abandoned on the grass. I was loudly wailing fat, hot tears of intense frustration and pain. "I cannot do this," I cried. "It is just too hard for me. I hate this." My father Marcus crouched down slowly in front of me. He was not the same terrible man from 2 nights ago. This man was wearing an old T-shirt stained with motor oil. He smelled faintly of sawdust and fresh coffee. He did not attempt to cuddle or comfort me. He simply pointed directly at my bloody knee. "Are you broken, Maya?" he asked in a firm, serious tone. "My knee really hurts a lot," I sobbed loudly. "I did not ask you about your knee," he said, his voice firm but surprisingly not unkind. He tapped my forehead lightly with his finger. "I asked you if you are broken," he repeated. I sniffled, trying to understand his meaning, and slowly shook my head. "No," I whispered. "Good," he said, pulling me quickly to my feet. "Then you must get right back on that bicycle immediately. You fall down, you get right back up again. You never ever give up on anything. Do you hear me? That man right there was the father who had taught me the value of true strength. The man who had trained me to be a relentless fighter. The man who had, in his own strange way, given me the necessary tools to secretly build this very large financial empire. How could that same man be the father who had called me a thief and violently thrown me onto the lawn 2 nights ago? I stood up quickly. I was no longer shaking uncontrollably. He was not just my abuser and tormentor. He was still my father, and I simply could not sit here passively trading stocks while he was fighting for his life in an intensive care unit. I would not go directly to them. I would not go directly to her, but I absolutely had to know the truth. I had to see him for myself. I grabbed my keys, quickly got into the private elevator, and drove my Tesla, my real car, to Mercy Hospital. I parked the expensive car in the guest garage area, my heart pounding a heavy, sick rhythm against my ribs. I walked into the sterile antiseptic smell of the hospital lobby. I followed the directional signs for the intensive care unit. I saw the distinct sign reading ICU waiting room 3B. Through the clear glass partition, I could clearly see them. Chloe was pacing frantically back and forth, her face pale and full of a furious tension. My mother Denise was crumpled completely in a hard plastic chair, sobbing openly into her hands. I simply could not bring myself to go directly in there. I was definitely not ready to face them or their accusations. I noticed a small hospital cafe just across the wide corridor. It was dimly lit, mostly empty, but it offered a clear, direct view of the waiting room doors. I walked inside, ordered a black coffee, which I knew I would never drink, and found a small table hidden in the darkest corner. I would simply wait there. I would just watch them from a safe distance. I sat silently in the dark cafe, the untouched coffee slowly growing cold in my hands. Through the thick glass, I watched the desperate scene unfolding in the ICU waiting room. It was like watching a silent black and white movie of my family's total destruction. My mother Denise was no longer the furious, controlling matriarch. She was a crumpled, sobbing mess sitting helplessly in a hard plastic chair. Chloe was no longer pacing constantly. She was sitting awkwardly on the cold floor, her back leaning against the wall, her expensive designer clothes rumpled and dirty. She was rocking slowly back and forth, muttering softly to herself, her face pale and blotchy with tears. A doctor suddenly came out of the ICU and spoke quietly to them. I could not hear any of the words, but I clearly saw the worried gestures. I saw my mother look up at him, her face filled with desperate questions for the doctor. I saw Chloe not even react, just staring blankly and numbly at the floor. A small part of me, the 8-year-old girl who still only wanted her father's approval, felt a sharp, agonizing twist of immense guilt. This whole terrible situation was entirely my fault, I thought. I had deliberately pulled the financial plug. I had caused this entire crisis. But another colder part of me, the 28-year-old woman they had violently thrown onto the lawn, just watched them. I had simply stopped paying their enormous bills, their reaction, my father's weak heart, Chloe's desperate lies that was entirely on them, I reasoned. I was so deeply lost in this intense internal battle that I did not notice the man quickly approaching my table until he actually spoke to me. "Maya," he said quietly. My head snapped up immediately. I almost did not recognize him outside of their house. He was completely out of his usual context. It was Ryan, Chloe's powerful fiancé. He was wearing an expensive, perfectly tailored suit. He looked completely calm, clean, and entirely in control of himself. He looked exactly like he had just stepped out of a corporate boardroom, not a messy family crisis. My first immediate instinct was pure panic. I thought he was here to confront me, to physically threaten me on Chloe's behalf, to finish the job my family had already started. I braced myself for the verbal attack. "What do you want from me?" I shot back at him. He did not answer my question. He just pulled out the chair directly across from me and sat down. He placed his expensive leather briefcase on the floor quietly. He looked directly at me, his blue eyes surprisingly clear and intensely analytical. "I need to have a serious talk with you," he said. His voice was quiet and surprisingly contained no trace of anger toward me. "I have absolutely nothing at all to say to you," I shot back defiantly. "Go back to your fiancé." He completely ignored my open hostility toward him. He simply leaned forward slightly and said the unexpected words that completely stopped my heart cold. "I know that you did not steal the diamond necklace." I just stared intensely at him in stunned silence. I literally could not breathe. What exactly did he just say to me? He continued speaking, his voice still low and perfectly even. "I know that you are not the thief. I know that Chloe absolutely lied about everything. I know this because I personally watched her hide the necklace herself. My mind went instantly blank from the shock. I could not form a single coherent word. I just stared at him in disbelief. This man who was supposed to be my sworn enemy, this man who had just completely blown my entire reality to pieces for the second time in only 3 days. How, I finally managed to whisper, my voice shaking. How could you possibly know a secret like that? How? I repeated the word, my voice still barely audible. My mind was racing now in a terrified panic. Was this some kind of trick? Was he trying to set me up somehow? Trying to get me to confess to something else entirely, trying to trap me in a different lie. Ryan did not look like he was playing a malicious game. He still looked purely analytical. He glanced briefly across the corridor at the ICU waiting room. We could clearly see Chloe through the glass. She had stood up now and was pacing frantically back and forth, her phone pressed tightly to her ear. She was probably calling all her friends, managing the public narrative of her fake grief. My mother, Denise, was still just a crumpled heap in the hard plastic chair. He turned back to face me, his blue eyes cold and intensely clear. "It is very simple, Maya," he explained. "I saw her do it. I have the definitive proof." "Proof?" I whispered in shock. "What kind of proof do you have? You were not even there that night. You were supposedly in New York City." "I know I was," he said calmly, "but my camera was." I just stared at him, confused and bewildered. "Your camera? What exactly are you talking about?" Ryan leaned back comfortably, taking a sip of his own coffee, which I had not even noticed him buy. He seemed completely unfazed by the family drama unfolding only 50 feet away from us. "My family is extremely wealthy, Maya," he said to me, as if he were just discussing the ordinary weather. "We are very careful, and we actively protect all of our assets. And when I started officially dating Chloe, I started to notice certain things about her." "What things did you notice?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "She is intensely obsessed with her social status," he said, his voice lowering slightly, "and she is deeply paranoid about everything. She constantly talks about people being bitterly jealous of her, about people constantly wanting to steal her things. She even falsely accused a maid at my parents' house of taking a bracelet last month, only to find it later in her own handbag 2 days later. She is incredibly careless, but she blames absolutely everyone else for her mistakes." I knew exactly what he was describing. She had been exactly like that everyone else for her mistakes. I knew exactly what he was describing. She had been exactly like that ever since we were children. He continued speaking. "When my mother gave her that valuable necklace, the very first thing Chloe said was not thank you. It was, 'Where can I possibly keep this? Safe so no one ever steals it.'" He shook his head slowly, a small humorless smile briefly on his lips. "My family's security team quickly advised me that given her intense volatility and the high value of the gift she was receiving, we should discreetly install a small private security camera inside her room at your parents' house." I was utterly floored by this revelation. A hidden camera in her own bedroom. "Does she even know about it?" I asked in shock. "Of course not," Ryan said flatly. "It is a micro-cam carefully hidden inside the smoke detector unit. It only records motion for important insurance purposes, for her own protection." Ironically, he reached into the inner pocket of his expensive suit jacket and pulled out his phone. It was sleek, expensive, and in that powerful moment it looked exactly like a loaded weapon. I did not think much of it until Denise frantically called me today at the hospital, babbling nonsensically about you stealing the necklace. But her rushed story simply did not make any sense to me. It sounded heavily rehearsed, so I decided to check the footage from the camera. He tapped the screen repeatedly, his thumb scrolling through the files. "It took me a little while to find the correct timestamp," he explained, "but I finally found it. It was right after dinner. Right after you accidentally spilled the water." He turned the phone around and carefully placed it on the small cafe table between us. "You should watch this now, Maya," he instructed. My hand was shaking so badly from the shock that I had to grip the edge of the table very tightly. I stared intently at the small screen. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel the sick, heavy beat in my throat. I held my breath tightly as the disturbing video began to play. I stared intently at the small glowing phone screen as my heart turned into a cold stone in my chest. Ryan pressed the play button. The video had absolutely no sound, but the visual quality was crystal clear and sharp. The camera angle was positioned high from the corner of the ceiling, looking directly down upon K.H. Lowe's perfectly decorated bedroom. The time stamp visible in the corner of the video showed it was Sunday night, just moments after I had accidentally spilled the water. I watched in shock as K.H. Lowe violently burst into her room. She was not acting frantic or hysterically crying. Her movements were instead sharp, precise, and filled with suppressed anger. She slammed her bedroom door shut with him, and force and to my growing horror I watched her quickly lock it securely. She stood motionless in the center of the room for a second with her back facing the hidden camera, and I could clearly see her shoulders tensing up with tension. Then she walked very calmly and purposefully to her large jewelry box which sat on her dresser. The diamond necklace was lying right there, clearly visible. She did not grab it in a panic or fear. She simply picked it up and calmly looked at it. Then she walked over to her enormous closet. She pushed aside a long row of her expensive shoes and keyed a secret code into a small black safe that I never knew existed. She placed the diamond necklace securely inside the safe, closed the heavy door, and then spun the dial several times. She had deliberately hidden the necklace herself. My breath caught tightly in my throat from the sheer audacity of her actions. I was actively watching a crime being meticulously planned out. K.H. Lowe then stood directly in front of her full-length mirror. She was talking silently to herself, and her face was twisting with expressions. I could not hear any of the words she was saying, but I could clearly see the sheer rage on her face. She was visibly rehearsing her next steps. She paced the length of the room and then abruptly stopped. A new, sickeningly brilliant idea suddenly seemed to cross her face. A small, cruel, triumphant smile appeared briefly on her lips. She walked back to her bedroom door, quickly unlocked it, and peered cautiously out into the hallway. "Wait," Ryan whispered beside me, his voice startling me greatly. "Watch this specific part now." She is switching camera angles. This is the camera feed from the hallway camera now. He quickly tapped the screen. The camera angle instantly changed. It was now a grainier black and white image showing the upstairs hallway. I saw K.H. Lowe exit her room, look carefully both ways, and then creep stealthily down the hall to the door of my bedroom. She quickly slipped inside my room. She was inside my room for less than a full minute. "Now," Ryan said, his voice grim and serious, back to her room. "This is the part of the video that truly made me sick." He switched the camera feed back to the high-definition color camera. K.H. Lowe quickly re-entered her room. She was now holding something small and shiny silver in her hand. "Oh my God," I whispered loudly. I instantly recognized the object. That is my hair clip, the very one I have been actively searching for all week long. I watched completely paralyzed as K.H. Lowe walked over to her own large bed. She lifted her own pillow, placed my silver hair clip carefully underneath it, and then pressed the pillow down very firmly. She had meticulously planned every single step of this deceit, the elaborate frame-up, the specific evidence, every single part of the malicious plan. Finally, she stood directly in front of her full-length mirror. She took a deep theatrical breath. She deliberately messed up her own perfect hair and began violently rubbing her eyes hard to make them look red and swollen. She then practiced a look of frantic, gasping terror, and then she opened her mouth wide and let out a silent scream on the video. But I instantly remembered the awful loud sound of that same scream from downstairs. She screamed, and then she bolted out of the room, leaving the door wide open to go and perform the final act of her wicked play. The incriminating video ended. I was completely unable to move or speak. My blood felt like cold ice water rushing through my veins. This was not just a brief moment of jealous rage or impulse. This entire scheme was completely premeditated. This was utterly cold and deeply evil. She planned all of this herself. I whispered, staring intently at the black screen of the phone. She planned to actively frame me for the theft. Ryan slowly locked his phone and put it carefully back into his pocket. He looked directly at me, his face grim and serious. "That is not even the worst part of this entire situation, Maya," he said. That is not even the very worst part. I looked up from the black screen of Ryan's phone, my mind still intensely reeling from the shocking video footage. What, I demanded, what could possibly be any worse than what I just saw? She planned the whole thing. She framed me for a felony theft. The video clearly shows what she did, Ryan said, his voice grim and heavy. This entire situation is truly about who she is as a person and who your mother is as a person. What exactly are you talking about now? I asked, when Chloe could not reach you at all this morning, he explained. She called me instead. She was hysterical, screaming constantly about her lost tuition payment. After she finally hung up with me, she eventually got a hold of your mother. I have been genuinely concerned about her unstable state of mind for some time now. Admitted, my personal security system automatically records all phone calls from her specific number now. My blood ran instantly cold with fear. You recorded her phone call with my mother, I asked in disbelief. I did do that, and you absolutely need to hear this conversation, he insisted. This recording is from about 9:30 this very morning, before your father was ever rushed to the hospital. He tapped his phone again and a new screen appeared immediately. It was an audio file recording. He pressed the play button. I heard my sister's voice, thick with both panic and raw rage. Mom, finally, that she did it to me, she shrieked. She cut off my tuition payment. Parsons just sent me a final severe warning. My car is definitely next now. She is completely ruining my entire life right now. Then I heard my mother's voice, but it was not the hysterical sobbing mess I saw just now in the waiting room. This voice was a low, sly, scheming whisper. Lower your voice immediately, Chloe, my mother instructed. Your father is currently at the bank right now. He is desperately trying to talk to them to see if he can secure a bridge loan or something to help us. He is trying his best to reason with them now. Alone, Chloe shrieked in disbelief. Reason with them? Are you actually kidding me right now? We are totally broke. This entire crisis is all Maya's fault. She is destroying our family right before my wedding date. She is doing this intentionally to deeply humiliate me. I know, baby, I know. My mother soothed her daughter. I am thinking about our next move. I am intensely thinking. We absolutely need her to turn the money back on immediately. We need strong leverage over her. There was a long, noticeable pause in the conversation. I just stared intently at the phone, my heart hammering loudly in my chest. Then my mother's voice came back, but it had completely changed in tone. It was sly, cold, and deeply manipulative. What if, my mother began, what if we tell her it is truly about your father's heart condition? Chloe sounded completely confused now. What? She asked, like he is actually sick. He is totally fine right now. No, you are not listening to me properly, Denise said impatiently to her daughter. We tell her that the intense stress. We tell her that the shock of receiving the foreclosure notice was simply too much for his weak heart. We tell her that he is now in hospital and seriously ill. We tell her that he suffered a massive heart attack. Another silence followed, shorter this time. Then I heard K.H. Lowe's voice, slow and full of a dawning terrible admiration for the plan. Mom, that is absolutely brilliant, she said. A heart attack. Oh, that is absolutely perfect leverage. He is in the ICU now. My mother continued, her voice gaining confidence. The doctors do not know if he will even make it through the night. All because of the intense stress she deliberately caused. Chloe actually laughed out loud. It was a short, sharp, ugly sound of triumph. Let us see the heartless bitch try to ignore that kind of life. Threatening emergency, she crowed. She would be forced to turn everything back on immediately. She would never want to be directly responsible for actively killing her own father. The devastating audio file ended. Ryan quickly switched it off. The silence in the small cafe was absolutely deafening now. I could not feel my hands or my feet at all. I could only clearly hear my mother's and my sister's terrible words playing over and over again inside my head. That is brilliant. Let us see the heartless bitch. Ignore that. They had meticulously planned to lie about a heart attack. I looked at Ryan, my voice now a cracked, fragile whisper. The heart attack, it was all just a fake lie. Ryan watched me closely, his expression unreadable. He slowly shook his head side to side, and the small amount of relief I had initially felt, the hope that this was all just a sick fake drama, immediately evaporated. "Oh no," he said, his voice quiet and serious. "The heart attack is very, very real, unfortunately. He is in the ICU right now fighting for his life. The doctors are genuinely concerned about his prognosis." I was completely lost now, but the audio recording, I stammered out. They actively planned it themselves. Chloe said it was absolutely brilliant. Yes, Ryan said, his voice hard and uncompromising. They absolutely did plan it all out. That is what you need to fully understand, Maya. Their very first instinct was not to calmly solve the immediate financial problem. Their first instinct was to quickly create a massive manipulative lie to heavily guilt you into immediately giving them their money back. He leaned forward, his voice dropping even lower now. The audio you just heard was from 9:30 this morning. They were actively planning to fake a heart attack for leverage. They were conspiring to emotionally blackmail you back into control. But then what actually happened later, I asked. The truth apparently intervened, Ryan said, and he looked genuinely disturbed by the whole twisted situation. After your mother and sister had that terrible phone call, your father Marcus drove straight to the bank. He was desperately trying to get a new line of credit, a large loan, anything he could secure based on the value of the house. Very house you were secretly paying the mortgage on all along. He paused, allowing the horrifying pieces of the story to fall into place for me. The bank manager, of course, ran his credit report. He instantly saw the canceled credit cards listed. He saw the returned payment for the BMW car. And he saw the pending foreclosure notice listed on the house. He saw that whatever financial backing your father had been relying on was now completely gone. The bank manager told him simply no, point blank. No loan, no more money for him. Ryan slowly shook his head in disgust. According to the emergency call Denise received from the hospital, your father stood up, immediately started turning red in the face, and grabbed tightly at his chest. He collapsed right there on the floor of the bank manager's office. The heart attack was tragically real. I just stared at Ryan, my mind trying desperately to process the sheer twisted sickness of it all. They had actively planned a lie about the very thing that had actually and tragically happened in real life. The universe had, in a dark, terrible way, delivered their lie for them right on time. Ryan watched my stunned silence, his own face grim and serious. "Your family, Maya," he said slowly, his voice filled with a kind of raw disgust. "They are absolutely terrifying people." I stared intensely at Ryan. My mind struggled to reconcile the calm, collected man sitting across from me with the man my sister Khlo was supposed to marry. He was perfectly calm, he was extremely methodical, and he had just shown me both video and audio proof that my entire family was actively conspiring against me. He was supposed to be completely on their side. He was their golden ticket to the high-status life they desperately craved. "Why," I finally whispered, my throat feeling painfully dry, "why are you showing all of this evidence to me? She is your fiancé." I watched him very carefully now. This absolutely had to be some kind of trick or trap. Perhaps he wanted me to agree to give them all the money back in exchange for this shocking information. Ryan finished his coffee, slowly placing the empty cup down on the table with a quiet, deliberate click. He was no longer looking toward the ICU waiting room. He was looking directly into my eyes. "My family has a significant amount of money, Maya," he stated, his voice perfectly even and measured. "That fact is certainly not a secret to anyone. But my grandfather did not build his successful company by lying and by cheating people. He built it solely on a strong reputation and respect. We have very strict rules that we follow. We have an established code of conduct. You do not actively defraud people out of their money. You do not steal from anyone, and you absolutely do not betray your own blood relatives for a little bit of cash or for a better social position." He leaned in slightly closer to me. "I honestly thought Khlo was just spoiled and maybe a little heiss, strung obsessed only with outward appearances. I can easily handle spoiled behavior, he admitted. It is a very common thing in my world. But this situation, he said, gesturing back toward the ICU waiting room with his head. This is not simply spoiled behavior. This is completely rotten and malicious. This indicates a fundamental, serious character flaw in her personality. He shook his head, slowly, looking genuinely disturbed by the revelation. To actively frame your own sister for a felony theft, to plot and scheme to steal money from her, to lie and try to emotionally blackmail her about a heart attack. I absolutely cannot marry that kind of person. I cannot possibly bring that level of corruption into my family's life. He paused again, and his voice suddenly went cold and hard. She did not just lie to you, Maya. She has also been lying constantly to me for months. She told me repeatedly that you were financially unstable. She told me you were a huge financial drain on your parents' resources. She told me that you were completely dangerous to everyone. She built this entire false narrative where she was the constant innocent victim of your instability and mental state. I finally understood his true motivation. He was certainly not here for me or my well-being. He was primarily here for himself and his own reputation. He was meticulously gathering all of his evidence together. He was quickly cutting his losses and moving on. He was actively protecting his family's impeccable reputation and his own secure future from the toxicity he had just uncovered. He possessed the clear video footage. He possessed the damning audio recording. He possessed the absolute undeniable truth. My family had just lost their ultimate golden ticket to a better life, and they were still completely unaware of it. I looked at him, this strange, cold, and completely unexpectedly honest ally. I took a shaky, deep breath, my mind finally beginning to shift completely from being a victim to becoming a strong survivor. So, I asked, my voice now low and steady with resolve, "What is your next move going to be now?" Ryan's face was grim and serious. He looked directly at me, the stranger who was the sister of the woman he was supposed to marry. "I am going to do the right and principled thing," he said, finally, his voice flat and devoid of any emotion. He turned his head and looked across the corridor toward the ICU waiting room once more. We could clearly see them through the glass partition, two figures blurred by the reflection of the light. Kate was pacing frantically now, intensely agitated. Denise was still sadly crumpled in her hard plastic chair. He turned back to me with a resolute expression. "But I absolutely need you to come in there with me right now." I recoiled strongly, as if he had just suggested I jump off the tall building with him. "What?" I exclaimed. "Go in there now and face them after everything that has happened." "I cannot. I simply will not do that." "Yes, you will come with me," Ryan stated firmly. It was not a polite request at all. It was an absolute statement of fact and necessity. "They are going to watch me walk in that door," he explained. "They are going to immediately think that their savior has arrived to fix everything. Your mother will think her desperate phone calls finally worked. K.H. Lowe will immediately think her brilliant malicious plan to lie about a heart attack was so incredibly effective that it actually worked." I could easily picture the scene, the overwhelming relief on their faces, the immediate predictable pivot back to their toxic script. "Oh, Ryan, thank God you are finally here. Maya has caused us such a terrible problem, but now you can fix all of it for us." They would undoubtedly use him to immediately pay all of the expensive hospital bills, and I would still remain the ultimate villain in their warped story. "I truly do not care what they think about me," I whispered, shaking my head stubbornly. "I just want to go home to my penthouse now." "You have all the proof you need. You are clearly breaking up with her. Just go right now. Leave me completely out of this family mess." Ryan shook his head slowly but firmly. "No, you do not fully get it, Maya," he insisted. "People like this entire family of yours do not just simply stop their behavior. They actively framed you for a felony theft. They were actively planning to emotionally blackmail you even before your father was taken to the bank. They will never ever stop trying to control you, and they will relentlessly never stop blaming you for all of their problems." His powerful words hit me with the force of a physical blow. He was absolutely right about their nature. They will definitely blame you for this tragic heart attack. He said, his voice now like cold, sharp ice. They will absolutely blame you for the failed wedding and their humiliation. They will continue to tell every single relative and every friend that their perfect life utterly fell apart because you were financially unstable and deeply mentally ill. They will completely destroy your good reputation and credibility. You will never truly be free of this toxic cycle unless you confront it directly, unless we confront it together right now. He saw the flicker of doubt and hesitation in my eyes and immediately pressed the issue further. They need to be completely exposed to the truth, not just to me alone. They need to be completely exposed to each other's vile actions. Your mother Denise needs to finally know that her golden child Kachlo is nothing more than a common deceitful thief. Your sister Kachlo needs to see her brilliant malicious plan fail completely in public. And your father, I whispered softly, my father, the distant memory of him teaching me how to ride my blue bicycle flashed vividly in my mind. Your father, Ryan said quickly, finishing my incomplete thought. Your father Marcus needs to clearly see exactly who he violently threw out of his family house 2 nights ago. I looked across the hallway at the waiting room again. I saw Kachlo, the sister who had meticulously planned my downfall while I was secretly paying for her tuition. I saw Denise, the mother, who had actively plotted to emotionally blackmail me with a fake illness. The crushing guilt I had felt just moments before instantly vanished, completely replaced by that same cold, hard clarity from the night they kicked me out of the house. The 8-year-old girl who was terrified of constantly disappointing her dad was finally gone for good. The 28-year-old woman who had successfully built a 7-figure financial empire from absolutely nothing at all, the woman who had been secretly funding their entire charade, was now sitting confidently in her place. I stood up slowly and purposefully. The untouched cup of coffee sat abandoned on the small table, a forgotten prop from the scene. You are absolutely right about this, I said with determination. My voice was no longer shaking or hesitant. It was steady, it was strong, and it was cold. They are in their right now, waiting patiently for their victim to return. They are actively waiting for the failure Maya to come crawling back, immediately begging them for their forgiveness, ready to pay all of their enormous hospital bills. I looked directly at Ryan, this strange calculating man who had just unexpectedly become the most powerful ally I had ever possessed. They have been waiting patiently for this play to finally end, I said firmly. Okay, then let us go right now and give them the grand finale they deserve. Ryan nodded once, his cold eyes showing a flicker of approval and respect. He immediately stood up and picked up his expensive leather briefcase. He looked absolutely immaculate, like a lawyer confidently walking into a closing courtroom, not a man about to completely detonate his own life. I straightened my rumpled shirt, the one Kachlo had grabbed and twisted violently. I ran my fingers quickly through my hair. I felt the cold, chilling ice settle firmly in my veins now. They are waiting in waiting room 3B, he reminded me. I know exactly where they are, I replied. Together we walked slowly out of the dark cafe across the sterile, brightly lit hospital corridor. Every single one of our footsteps echoed slightly on the tiled floor. I could clearly see them now through the glass door. Denise was rubbing Kachlo's shaking back in an attempt to comfort her. We stopped just outside the specific door. I looked at Ryan's face. He looked back at me. Ready? He asked quietly. Let us end this entire painful chapter, I said with firm resolve. I pushed the door open wide. I pushed the heavy door to waiting room 3B open slowly and deliberately. The distinct smell of antiseptic and stale coffee immediately hit me, a scent now strongly associated with fear. They were all gathered inside the small beige room just as Ryan had described, huddled together in the dim hospital light. My father Marcus was lying restlessly in hospital bed, propped up awkwardly on several pillows. He looked much smaller and weaker than I had ever seen him before. The powerful, terrifying man who had violently thrown me out onto the lawn just 2 nights ago was completely gone. In his place was a gray, frail-looking man with his eyes closed and an oxygen tube gently placed in his nose. He appeared stable but incredibly frail. My mother Denise and my sister Kachlo were both sitting stiffly in the hard plastic chairs right beside him. Their expensive coats were thrown haphazardly over the backs of the chairs, looking completely out of place in this sterile environment. They both looked utterly exhausted and deeply terrified. The second the door latch clicked shut, my mother's head instantly snapped up toward me. Her eyes were swollen and red, rimmed from crying, and they went wide with an expression I could not immediately interpret. It was not anger this time. It was not relief either. It was pure, immediate calculation. "Maya," she gasped loudly. She scrambled quickly to her feet so fast that her chair scraped loudly on the linoleum floor tiles. "Oh, thank God you are finally here, Maya," she exclaimed. "Your father." She rushed instantly toward me, her hands outstretched as if she intended to warmly embrace me. As if she had not physically slapped me across the face just hours ago, as if she had not silently stood by and watched me be violently thrown out of her home. I did not move an inch from my spot. I just stood firmly in the doorway, my arms crossed and my face a cold, unmoving mask. Her hands stopped abruptly, hovering awkwardly in the empty air between us as she finally realized I was absolutely not going to play the part of the forgiving, forgotten daughter. He has been asking specifically for you," she stammered, quickly pivoting to try a different tactic of manipulation. From the hospital bed I heard a weak rasping sound. "Maya." I looked over at him. My father's eyes were now open. They were fixed directly on me. They were filled with a raw, desperate fear I had never ever witnessed in him before. "Maya," he said again, his voice a dry, fragile whisper. He made a weak attempt to lift his hand toward me. "Please, you have to save us," he pleaded weakly. "You have to save the family now." He was clearly struggling hard for his breath. I am begging you for your help." Save the family, the same family that had falsely called me a thief, the same family that had repeatedly called me a total failure, the same family that had violently thrown me out into the freezing cold night. They did not actually want me, they only desperately wanted my large bank account. K.H. Lowe, who had been staring blankly at the floor, finally looked up at the commotion. Her face was pale and her makeup was badly smeared. The arrogant golden child image was completely gone now. She looked small and intensely scared. She leaned quickly toward my mother. Her voice was a terrified, frantic whisper, but loud enough for everyone in the small room to hear clearly. "Mom, it is absolutely true," she cried now, shedding real tears of sheer panic. "I just talked to the hospital billing office again moments ago. The doctor said our insurance, it is not working at all. They officially canceled the policy completely." The shocking news of the cancelled insurance policy hung heavy in the sterile air of the room like a looming death sentence. My mother Denise was openly sobbing now, her face buried deep in her trembling hands. "It is all completely over now," she wailed loudly. "We are utterly ruined. Marcus, what are we going to do to survive?" My father Marcus was simply staring intently at me now. His face was a grayish color, but his eyes were sharp and focused. He was no longer pleading for help. He was just watching me intently, as if he was finally realizing the catastrophic depth of his immense miscalculation. But K.H. Lowe saw my complete silence and immediately mistook it for immense guilt. She saw my utter calm and completely mistook it for crippling weakness. She believed I was finally cornered, finally completely broken by the severe reality of our father's massive heart attack. She scrambled quickly to her feet, her tear-streaked face twisting back into that terribly familiar arrogant sneer. "Do you clearly see what you have deliberately done now?" She hissed at me, her voice low and filled with fury. "Look at him fighting his life. You did this terrible thing to him. Your pathetic little tantrum caused this. You have practically killed him with your actions. I just stood there silently by the doorway, unmoving and unresponsive. I did not utter a single word to her. I simply met her angry gaze directly. My silence only made her even angrier now. She took an aggressive step toward me. "This is all completely your fault, but you can still immediately fix it all, Maya." I almost laughed out loud at her relentless audacity. "Fix it? Yes," she stated as if she were talking slowly to a simple-minded child. "All of this mess, the house, the car, the tuition, even this horrible hospital situation." She gestured wildly toward my father in his bed. "All of it will completely disappear if you just simply apologize right now." Apologize to Ryan. She snapped, her voice rising sharply. He is the only one left with the necessary money. He is the only one who can fix all of this for us now. You just have to go to him right now. Get down on your knees if you absolutely have to beg him. You must tell him that you lied about everything. You must tell him that you stole the necklace because you were incredibly jealous of me. And you must beg him to forgive me for all the drama you caused us. She took a shaky breath, her eyes filled with a wild, calculating look of hope. If you do exactly that, he will certainly come back to me. He will pay all the massive hospital bills immediately. He will pay for the house. He will pay for absolutely everything. All you are required to do is tell the truth for once in your life and openly admit that you were the one who lied and stole. She looked so immensely proud of herself, so intensely confident in her twisted, terrible plan. She still truly believed that Ryan was her ultimate escape route from this disaster. She still believed that she was completely in control of the situation. I looked at her, this sister who had actively framed me for a felony. I looked at my mother, who was now nodding her head in eager agreement, hope dawning quickly on her tear-stained face. I looked at my father, who was silently watching everything, waiting for my response. They were all three of them waiting patiently for me to completely sacrifice myself on the altar of K.H. Lowe's happiness one final time. A small, cold smile briefly touched my lips now. Apologize to Ryan. I asked, my voice dangerously quiet and low. Apologize to Ryan. I let the challenging question hang heavily in the sterile, desperate air of the hospital room. Chloe, my sister, immediately saw my small smile and completely mistook it for a sign of weakness. She thought I was finally cornered and that she had truly won the final battle. Yes, she snapped, quickly grabbing onto what she desperately thought was a solid lifeline. He will listen to me when I explain. He loves me and he is devoted to me, but he is a man of strong principle, Maya. He needs to clearly hear you openly admit what you did wrong. He needs to know that you are deeply sorry for stealing the necklace and for causing all this terrible drama. My mother Denise scrambled quickly to her feet, her face a mask of desperate, twisted hope. She is right, Meyer. Oh, baby, please just tell Ryan that you are truly sorry now, she begged. Tell him that you were emotionally upset and unstable. He is a very good, generous man. He will certainly understand what happened. He can easily fix all of this for us. He can immediately pay the enormous hospital bill. Even my father Marcus lifted his head weakly from the pillow, now his voice a weak rasp. Do it, Maya, he instructed. Do exactly what your mother tells you to do. Apologize immediately and fix this entire mess that you deliberately made. They were all staring intently at me. All three of them were simultaneously begging, demanding, and pleading for me to instantly sacrifice myself one more final time. To lie, to take all the blame, and to save them immediately from the natural consequences of their own awful actions. I held their collective gaze for one long silent moment. I let their sheer desperation intensely soak into the room's atmosphere. Then I turned my head, slightly looking toward the open doorway of the waiting room just behind where they were gathered together. That is a very interesting, desperate plan you have concocted. I said, my voice clear and extremely loud. But why do you not simply ask him yourselves right now? Ryan, you can come in immediately. Time completely stopped and froze in that moment. My mother's hopeful expression instantly froze, then completely shattered with realization. My father's head fell back heavily onto the pillow in confusion. K.H. Lowe, who had been standing with a smug, "I will fix it" look on her face, spun around so quickly and violently that she almost lost her balance completely. Ryan was standing completely still in the doorway. He was not panicked or stressed at all. He was wearing his immaculate, expensive suit, holding his leather briefcase, and looking as completely calm and detached as if he were simply walking into a Starbucks coffee shop. "Ryan!" K.H. Lowe shrieked loudly. It was a raw sound of pure animal terror and panic. She rushed instantly toward him, her hands outstretched toward him. Ryan, oh thank God you are finally here. You have to listen to me right now. She Maya, she has completely lost her mind. She is trying desperately to destroy all of us. She tried to quickly grab his arm, to pull him into a comforting embrace, to instantly re-establish their broken alliance. Ryan took a single deliberate step backward, causing her hands to fall awkwardly into the empty air between them. He did not look at my mother or my father at all. His cold blue eyes were locked only on K.H. Lo's face. "Why are you standing with her?" K.H. Lo demanded, her voice rising to a frantic pitch as she pointed a shaking finger directly at me. "Did she call you and tell you lies? What lies did she dare tell you?" "She did not tell me anything at all, Chloe," Ryan said, his voice flat and unemotional. He reached slowly into the inner pocket of his suit jacket. "I am just here," he said, "to return this item to you now." He held up his hand. In his palm, gleaming brightly under the harsh fluorescent hospital lights, was the enormous engagement ring. It was massive, a 3-carat diamond that had been the subject of my mother's proud hushed whispers for many months. K.H. Lo gasped sharply, and for a split second her entire face lit up with a terrible, desperate hope. She actually thought he was standing there to propose to her again, to fix absolutely everything, and to put the ring back on her finger while paying all their bills immediately. "Ryan," she breathed, her voice suddenly sweet and appealing, taking a step toward him now. "Oh, Ryan, I knew you would understand me completely." Ryan did not even look directly at her. His eyes were fixed intently on my father, Marcus, the man lying weak and helpless in the hospital bed. With a quick flick of his wrist, Ryan tossed the ring. It did not fly toward K.H. Lo. It landed squarely on the thin hospital blanket covering my father's legs, where it bounced once before settling with a dull, heavy finality. "It is completely over now," Ryan said clearly. His voice was not angry at all. It was just empty of all emotion. "We are entirely done, Chloe." The silence in the waiting room was completely absolute. My mother, Denise, looked intensely at the expensive ring lying on the hospital blanket. Then she stared hard at Ryan, her mouth dropping open in a silent scream of disbelief. K.H. Lo just stared blankly at the diamond ring. She stared at it intently as if it were a deadly snake. Then she completely snapped under the pressure. It was not a tearful sob, but a horrifying shriek, a raw guttural sound of a desperate animal trapped in a corner. "No," she screamed loudly, her head whipping around violently toward me. This is entirely because of you. You deliberately called him, didn't you? You viciously lied to him and manipulated him." She instantly lunged aggressively at me again, but Ryan, who had been anticipating her violent reaction, simply stepped calmly directly into her path. He did not physically touch her at all. He simply blocked her path to me completely. "Get out of my way immediately, Ryan," she sobbed loudly, desperately trying to get around him to reach me. "She did this entire thing. She maliciously lied to you. She has always been a constant liar. She is the one who secretly stole the necklace in order to frame me for the crime. She is the one who has been actively trying to completely ruin my life for months." She turned her tear-streaked blotchy face toward her former fiancé. "Ryan, baby, please do not listen to her lies. She is a complete psycho. She is financially unstable. She is absolutely lying to you." Ryan just stood there, calmly allowing her frantic tirade to wash right over him. He waited patiently until she paused briefly to take a breath, her chest heaving violently. He looked directly at her, his face a cold mask of profound disappointment. "Really?" he asked her, his voice dangerously quiet. "She is lying about everything." He slowly reached into his suit jacket pocket and pulled out his phone again. He held it up slightly, the screen glowing brightly. "Then what about this video?" he asked her. "What about the video footage, Chloe, of you all by yourself carefully hiding that same necklace in your own bedroom safe?" K.H. Lo's desperate words hung heavily in the air. "She is lying to you. She is completely unstable. She made it all up herself." Ryan did not even bother to look directly at her now. His gaze was fixed firmly on my parents. "Did she really make it up?" he asked quietly, his voice chillingly calm. He turned the phone with the screen still glowing directly toward the hospital bed where my father Marcus was lying. He held it up in a clear view so both Marcus and my mother Denise could see the image clearly. Then you should both watch this video, Ryan instructed. Both of you should see the truth. He pressed the play button on the screen. I watched the intense reactions on my parents' faces. At first, there was only confusion written on their expressions. They saw Lo's bedroom displayed on the phone screen. They watched her violently slam the door shut and lock it securely. My mother's brow furrowed in confusion. "What exactly is this video?" she whispered loudly. Then they both watched in growing horror as the silent image of their golden child, their perfect daughter, calmly walked over to her dresser, picked up the diamond necklace, and then securely locked it away inside a hidden safe. I saw my father's hand clench tightly on the thin hospital blanket covering him. They watched further as Lo then went quickly into the hallway, slipped stealthily into my room, and returned quickly holding my small silver hair clip. They watched silently as she lifted her own pillow and carefully planted the false evidence beneath it. My mother's hand flew quickly to her mouth in shock, a small strangled gasp escaping her lips. She instantly knew in that shocking moment that I had been telling the complete truth all along, but the devastating video was still playing and not over yet. They watched in horrified dead silence as their daughter stood directly in front of a mirror, violently rubbed her own hair, and rubbed her eyes raw and red. They watched her practice a look of intense panic. They watched her visibly rehearse her own fake hysteria and screaming, and finally they watched her open her mouth in a silent scream before immediately running out of the room to maliciously frame her sister. The incriminating video finally ended. My father looked exactly as if he had been struck by a powerful bolt of lightning. He was staring intensely at Lo, his face gray and slack with shock, his mouth hanging wide open. My mother was frantically shaking her head, whispering the word "no, no, no, no," over and over again in disbelief. Lo saw the looks on both of their faces. She instantly saw that the massive lie was broken forever, and she completely snapped under the pressure. "It is absolutely fake footage," she shrieked loudly, lunging desperately across the bed, trying to forcibly grab the phone from Ryan's hand. "It is not real at all. She edited the video herself. She is a computer freak and she faked it all. Tell them the truth, Ryan. Tell them the video is fake." Ryan calmly pulled the phone back, keeping it just out of her desperate reach. He looked directly at her, his face a mask of pure deep disgust. "It is absolutely not fake, Chloe," he stated, his voice flat and unwavering, "and that is certainly not the only definitive proof I possess now." He tapped his phone screen again, pulling up a totally different file, an audio recording file. "So," he asked quietly, his voice dangerously quiet, "do you also want to explain the recording of you and your mother from this morning actively planning to lie to everyone about a heart attack?" Ryan's final question about the audio recording, about the planning of a fake heart attack, landed with the pure force of a physical explosion in the small room. Lo just instantly froze in place. Her mouth, which had been open in a silent scream, just hung there awkwardly. But my mother Denise instantly reacted severely. She made a small choking sound, as if she was unable to get enough air into her lungs. Her eyes wide with terror darted frantically from Ryan to me, and then over to Marcus in the hospital bed. She instantly knew she was the one who had initially suggested the malicious plan. She was just as entirely guilty as Lo was in the scheme. She did not just sit down, she utterly collapsed. Her legs instantly gave out from underneath her, and she fell backward violently into the hard plastic visitor's chair. Her expensive designer handbag slid quickly from her lap, spilling all of its contents across the cold hospital floor. Lipstick, keys, and a small compact scattered everywhere like debris. She did not even notice the mess she had made. She just stared numbly into the middle distance. Her entire facade, her entire perfect, respectable family image was completely shattered in a single shocking second. My father Marcus had been watching the scene with increasing confusion, but at the word recording, at the chilling mention of a deliberate plan between his wife and his favorite daughter. His entire face suddenly changed expression. The deep anger he had been feeling toward me instantly vanished completely. The weakness from his severe heart attack was replaced by a new terrible clarity of realization. He pushed himself up slowly on his elbows. His eyes, which had been dull with pain, were now sharp and full of a dawning, sickening realization. He was no longer looking at me. He was staring intently at K.H., lo, his golden child. "Chloe," he rasped loudly, his voice a dry, horrified whisper. What exactly have you done to us?" That was the critical moment. That was the final fatal blow that sealed her fate. It was not Ryan's sudden devastating accusation. It was not my mother's instant total collapse. It was my father's single heartbreaking question. The man who had always enabled her wicked behavior, the man who had constantly adored her unconditionally, the man who had violently thrown me out of his house just to protect her reputation. He finally truly saw her for who she was. K.H. Lowe looked desperately at Ryan, her ticket to instant wealth and status, who was now just a cold, disgusted executioner. She looked at me, the supposed failure, standing silent and watching her perfect world completely burn down. She looked at her mother, a sobbing broken woman lying helpless on the floor, and finally she looked at her father, who was staring at her with pure unadulterated contempt and disappointment. Everything she had built was completely gone. The money, the marriage, the social status, the adoring parents, the family, everything was gone. She had intensely overplayed her hand, and in her final desperate attempt to completely ruin me, she had only succeeded in utterly destroying herself. The silence stretched for 3, 4, 5 long agonizing seconds, and then K.H. Lowe violently tilted her head back, her face a mask of raw, ugly despair. She let out a horrific scream. It was not an actual word. It was a sound, a long, hopeless animal wail of pure cornered agony that echoed violently through the entire ICU waiting room. K.H. Lowe's horrific scream filled the small hospital room, a raw, terrible sound of a desperate animal caught violently in a trap. My mother, Denise, was still lying completely helpless on the floor, a broken, sobbing heap of expensive clothing, muttering the same words over and over. "It is all completely over now. It is all completely over now." My father, Marcus, just stared blankly at K.H. Lowe, his face gray and slack as if he was truly seeing his golden child for the very first time in his life. And I was standing there perfectly calm and completely still. The violent storm was furiously raging all around me, but deep inside I was finally completely still and at peace. Ryan looked over at me, his eyes clearly questioning my next move. "What now?" he silently asked. I gave him a small nod of acknowledgement. He had successfully done his critical part in the exposure. This last part of the confrontation was completely and entirely mine to finish. I walked very slowly and deliberately through the sudden chaos in the room. I carefully stepped around my mother, who did not even bother to look up at me. I walked right past my sister, who was now hysterically babbling the words, "No, it is not fair at all. It is not fair." I walked right up to the side of my father's hospital bed. He flinched visibly when I approached him closely. He looked instantly away from me, bracing himself as if he fully expected me to scream loudly at him, or perhaps hit him, or curse him angrily. I did none of those expected things at all. I reached slowly into the purse he had violently thrown out onto the lawn 2 nights ago. I pulled out a thick, neatly bound folder that I had placed there earlier. It was a carefully prepared document from my lawyer. I had been meticulously preparing this exact specific folder for this single moment of confrontation. I did not throw it on the bed. I did not violently slam it down. I placed it gently and deliberately on the thin hospital blanket that covered his legs. It landed right next to the glittering, useless engagement ring that Ryan had tossed. What exactly is this?" my father whispered fearfully, his voice trembling uncontrollably. He looked intently at the official folder, as if it were an explosive bomb. That, I said calmly, my voice quiet but carrying clearly through the emotionally charged room, is an itemized ledger detailing your financial dependence on me. It is every single bill and payment I have made for this family since the desperate day you and Mom knelt on my penthouse floor and begged me to financially save you all. His eyes instantly darted down to the cover sheet of the ledger. $180,450, I said clearly, articulating every single syllable for him to fully absorb. That enormous amount includes the mortgage payments on your family house, the expensive tuition for her education, the lease payments on her BMW, and the family health insurance policy that you are all so intensely worried about canceling right now. I looked briefly at my mother, who was still huddled on the floor. I looked directly at my father in the hospital bed. I believe this exact amount completely covers any perceived debt I had for being raised in your home. The favor of you feeding and clothing me throughout my childhood are now more than financially even. My debt of gratitude to you is completely paid in full. I leaned in just a little closer so he could hear my quiet whisper clearly and distinctly. As of 2 nights ago, all of those financial payments have been permanently stopped completely. I have already personally spoken to the bank's foreclosure department. You have only 30 days to completely vacate the house before they officially begin foreclosure proceedings against you. The bank will be seizing K.H. Lowe's luxury car tomorrow morning. And the hospital, I paused intentionally. Well, I guess you will all have to completely figure that medical situation out entirely on your own now. My father's hand, the one not attached to an Roman IV drip, began to violently shake uncontrollably. He reached out his trembling fingers, fumbling weakly with the cover of the official financial folder. He stared blankly at the long detailed list of numbers, his eyes wide with a new dawning financial horror. My father's hand was shaking so violently that he could not even securely hold the large folder. It slid instantly from his lap and fell hard onto the floor, the itemized list of his own financial dependence spilling out messily across the tiles. My mother Denise finally managed to scramble up from the cold floor. Her face was now a complete ruin of smeared makeup and desperate terror. She saw the financial folder lying on the floor. She saw the large, expensive engagement ring lying uselessly on the bed. She saw K.H. Lowe, who was now just a statue of catatonic shock and despair. And she saw me standing purposefully by the doorway, my hand resting firmly on the handle, ready to instantly leave them forever. She lunged violently, not specifically at me, but directly for me in a desperate attempt to hold on to me. She grabbed my arm tightly, her long nails digging painfully deep into my skin. "Maya," she desperately begged me, her voice a hoarse, ugly whisper of panic. "Maya, please, you absolutely cannot do this terrible thing to us all. We are your family after all." I just looked down intensely at her desperate hand gripping my arm. This was the same hand that had brutally slapped me 2 nights ago, and I felt absolutely nothing toward her. "Your father," she sobbed uncontrollably, gesturing wildly toward the weak man in the bed. "He just had a severe heart attack. He is currently in a life-threatening crisis. You cannot just abandon us now." He is your father." I slowly and deliberately removed her hand from my arm. I looked her dead in the eyes with cold resolve. "No," I said firmly, my voice cutting sharply through her loud sobs, completely silencing the room. "He is not my father any longer. He made that very clear to me 2 nights ago when he threw me out. He personally told me I was no longer his daughter. He told me to get out of his house and never ever come back to him." I turned my cold gaze to my father. He was watching me intensely, his eyes wide and completely helpless now. "And you," I said to my mother, "you called me a common thief. You called me a family disgrace. You called me a worthless financial failure. You stood by silently and watched him violently throw me out onto the cold lawn. I took a determined step back toward the hallway, toward my new and wealthy life. "You are absolutely right about one crucial thing, Mrs. Miller," I stated clearly. "A disgrace has no earthly reason to willingly pay your monthly bills. A thief has no legal obligation to pay your mortgage. And a failure," I finished with absolute finality, "a failure has absolutely no family left to save at all." I looked at Ryan, who was now holding the door wide open for me. "Goodbye," I said for the last time. "Maya, no," Denise shrieked loudly, lunging desperately for me one last final time. But it was already far too late for them. I was already out and standing in the hallway. Ryan stepped out immediately after me, and the heavy ICU waiting room door swung shut loudly behind us with a soft final whoosh. I did not once look back toward the door. I did not need to see them. I could clearly hear them screaming through the closed door. Through the door I could distinctly hear the sound of Kehlo's high-pitched hysterical wailing and sobbing. I could clearly hear my mother screaming my name repeatedly and pounding violently on the door for me to come back. I could faintly hear the sound of my father Marcus gasping weakly for his breath, his heart monitor starting to beep loudly in a frantic new rhythm of crisis. I kept walking steadily side by side with Ryan down the long sterile corridor, and I did not stop walking away from them. The long sterile corridor of Mercy Hospital seemed to stretch out endlessly before me and Ryan, a clean white tunnel leading me directly into my new, completely solitary future. The heavy door to waiting room 3B had closed behind us with a gentle but intensely final whoosh, successfully sealing the fates of the 3 people we had just left behind in that small room. I continued walking, step after deliberate step, my momentum carrying me forward, and I absolutely did not look back toward the sound of their chaotic destruction. I could still hear the faint but clear sounds of their despair even through the thick material of the closed door. Kehlo's high-pitched hysterical wailing echoed in my memory, a frantic, desperate sound. My mother's persistent screaming of my name and her violent pounding on the door for me to return were clearly audible in my mind. And most disturbingly, I could hear the faint, ragged sound of my father Marcus gasping weakly for his breath, his critical heart monitor starting to beep loudly in a frantic new rhythm of distress. I felt Ryan walking steadily right beside me, matching my pace down the long, silent corridor. He was still carrying his expensive leather briefcase, his expression unchanging, maintaining his calm, detached demeanor. The entire experience, the high-stakes confrontation, the shocking exposure of their cruel lies, the terrible finality of leaving them in that moment of crisis, had left me feeling strangely light and profoundly empty. The immense weight of 28 years of constant effort and ceaseless expectation had suddenly been lifted entirely from my shoulders. I was no longer the desperate daughter tirelessly seeking acceptance. I was now the absolute force of control and financial power in the situation. I focused intently on the feeling of the smooth, cool floor under my feet, on the steady rhythm of my own breathing, trying desperately to push away the visceral memory of their last desperate cries and my father's final gasp. The memory of my father, the one who had lovingly taught me to be strong and to be a relentless fighter, briefly struggled against the brutal reality of the man who had violently thrown me out of his house and called me a thief. That internal battle of guilt against the cold, hard clarity of their betrayal had raged intensely inside me. But seeing the video and hearing the audio of their wicked plot had finally killed the last lingering remnants of my emotional attachment. Their monstrous first instinct was not to solve the financial problem, but to maliciously create a manipulative lie. A massive deception to guilt me into immediately giving them their money back. They had conspired to emotionally blackmail me using a fake illness, and then life had tragically delivered the real thing instead. They were truly terrifying people. Walking away now felt like the single most honest and necessary action I had ever taken in my entire life, the only way to genuinely protect my own peace and emotional well-being. I had successfully reclaimed my absolute power by completely canceling their finances. The full itemized ledger I had placed on my father's trembling legs, detailing the astonishing sum of $180,450 I had secretly paid for their respectable life, was my final, undeniable receipt for the complete payment of my supposed family debt. I owed them absolutely nothing more at all. Every bill, every payment, every act of filial devotion was now completely paid in full. The house was lost to foreclosure, K.H. Lowe's car would be seized, and the expensive hospital bills were now entirely their insurmountable problem to solve on their own. I had been explicitly told to get out and never return to their home. I had done exactly what I was told to do, and I had taken their entire financial lifeline with me. As Ryan and I continued to walk toward the hospital entrance, a deep, profound sense of self-worth settled over me, replacing the bitter hollowness. True strength, I realized, truly lies in having the immense courage to completely walk away from those people who absolutely refuse to recognize your actual value or worth. They had constantly let their image of success lifestyle and their utter contempt for my career define me as a worthless failure and a common thief. They never understood that their respectable, perfect life was nothing more than a carefully constructed lie, fully funded by the very person they had consistently despised and mocked. I now had my beautiful penthouse sanctuary waiting for me in the city, the silent, clean space that was a direct, tangible testament to my success and my own hard work. My powerful computers and my successful seven-figure financial empire were waiting patiently for my return. The life I had secretly built for myself was entirely independent, secure, and completely untouchable by their toxic manipulative chaos. My future was no longer tied to their desperate need for external validation or their constant financial demands. The heavy burden of their toxic expectations was finally gone forever, and in its absence I felt an exhilarating, powerful surge of pure control over my own destiny. I walked out of the sterile hospital, out of the darkness of their toxic family drama, and stepped directly into the bright, undeniable light of my own massive success. The city outside the hospital was a vast shimmering expanse of lights, a beautiful complex world that was now entirely mine to command. I walked out of the sterile hospital environment and into the crisp afternoon air with Ryan still silently at my side. The emotional firestorm I had just endured in that small waiting room had unexpectedly refined me, forging the cold, hard clarity I now possessed into an unshakable resolve. The profound humiliation I had felt just 2 days ago when my father had violently thrown me out onto the cold lawn now tasted like distant ash, a faint, unpleasant memory belonging to someone else entirely. That feeling was completely replaced by the immense satisfaction of knowing I had finally asserted my own absolute power. They had relied entirely on me, their despised failure of a daughter, to keep their entire respectable life from collapsing. The sheer delicious irony of that truth was a potent elixir filling me with a silent, powerful triumph. I had been scorned and openly mocked for my pathetic computer job, a job they had no idea generated a 7-figure income annually. While they were busy lecturing me about the vital importance of image and respectability, I was literally paying the enormous mortgage on the very roof over their heads and secretly funding K.H. Lowe's entire perfect high-status life. K.H. Lowe, the arrogant golden child, had needed the supposed financial failure to sustain her own illusion of success. The final confrontation in that grim hospital waiting room was not merely an act of revenge, it was a complete, comprehensive surgical excision of a toxic, cancerous growth that had been silently draining my life for 28 agonizing years. Watching my mother Denise's confident facade shatter completely when she realized the full extent of my financial control, and her own helplessness was a moment of true vindication. Hearing K.H. Lowe's horrifying shriek of utter animal agony when the full reality of her own destruction hit her was the sound of my personal emancipation finally achieved. And my father, Marcus the stern patriarch, who had pronounced me worthless and discarded me so easily, had been reduced to a gray, trembling figure, completely dependent on the mercy of the daughter he had disowned. The look of pure unadulterated contempt in his eyes the moment he threw me out was completely replaced by a raw, desperate fear, the fear of a man finally facing the devastating consequences of his own misjudgment. I had handed him the itemized ledger detailing the $180,450 I had paid for their respectable life, a devastating final receipt that completely covered any perceived debt I ever owed them for raising me. My final words to my mother standing at the doorway were not driven by rage, but by a profound, cold, calm logic. You cannot disown someone and then immediately expect them to pay all of your bills for you. I had calmly stated the undeniable truth to her. A failure has absolutely no family left to save at all. I had concluded, sealing their miserable fate and mine. Ryan's presence throughout the entire confrontation had been absolutely critical, the unexpected presence of a cold, honest ally. He, the man who represented everything they craved, wealth, status, reputation, had methodically dismantled their entire deceitful foundation with his damning video and audio proof. He had clearly exposed Cachlow as a malicious, premeditated thief and a desperate liar to her own adoring parents. He had exposed my mother as a scheming, manipulative plotter who was perfectly willing to lie about a life, threatening heart attack to regain financial control. He had used the very tools of the high society world they worshipped to completely destroy them, exposing their rotten core. His motivation was self-preservation and protecting his own reputation, but his actions had secured my absolute freedom and final victory. The beautiful diamond engagement ring tossed carelessly onto my father's thin hospital blank. It was the final heavy definitive symbol of their complete and utter downfall. It represented the absolute shattering of their grand desperate scheme, their total loss of their golden ticket to the respectable life they had always dreamed of achieving. The sound of that large heavy diamond bouncing once and then settling with a dull final thud was the true final climax of the entire painful story. Now, as I walked away from the hospital and from the remnants of my former life, I knew I was completely free to move forward. My financial success, my secure penthouse, my life of total independence were not just symbols of wealth. They were the tangible, concrete boundaries I had successfully erected against their toxic chaos. They could scream, they could wail, they could accuse me endlessly, but their poisonous words could never reach me in my safe sanctuary again. I was no longer the girl who had to worry about pleasing them or conforming to their ridiculous expectations. I was Maya the day trader, the successful woman who had built her own financial empire and had finally claimed her rightful immense self-worth. The cold, hard clarity of my final decision was unshakable and absolute. The pain was still present, a faint ache, but it was now overshadowed completely by the immense profound peace and the pure satisfaction of knowing that I had finally won my freedom and my life back completely. Outro, this story is not just about revenge, it is about truth, pain, and rising stronger than before. If this hit your heart, then you know what to do. Like the video, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more real stories that burn like fire. Until next time, stay sharp, stay loud, stay rebel.